Welcome to Answers in First Enoch, episode 12. We're getting through this. We found before Enoch defines 7 mountains of Eden in the area of the Garden of Eden, that is, not Eden in the North Pole. What could they be? Well, it just so happens this perfectly fits the area in which Enoch already identifies. Some might try to say, oh, that's confirmation bias. No, Enoch is not confirmation bias. Enoch is explaining exactly what he already showed in directions. He's affirming it. Affirming things is a very good thing to do in research. So let's go. Northeast of the Indian Ocean's eastern exit. So we know where we are, right? This is where the Spice Islands of Malaysia and Indonesia are, is the Garden of Eden. Go northeast from there, there's the arrow. It's pretty simple. There's nothing else there. There are no other options. Unless you want to claim, well, I guess shoals, like, say, China does. Well, except for they already lost that claim legally. Those shoals are still the Philippines on ancient maps. So there you have it. In fact, we cover one of those ancient maps from, I think it's 1775. That's off the top of my head. So if it's a few years off, no big deal. That's called the Philippines and nothing else. That's all that's there. There's nothing else there, and there's nothing else that could possibly be an option here. There is no confusion, no question, and certainly no debate. But now Enoch will describe 7 mountains, affirming his whole narrative in this area of significance. So we can prove this out even further and see that absolutely 100% that's exactly what he's been talking about the whole time. Now, both he does it from inside the earth and from the surface, and this is fascinating. Incredible stuff. Once again, affirms everything in these directions. Also in Jubilees, which agrees, and Genesis, which agrees, and all of history, really true history, real history that has a basis in an ancient root, in foundation, in the Bible. I mean, you try to find the Garden of Eden without the Bible, that's pretty stupid. I mean, no one would really do that, would they? Oh, they try. But let's just get to reality here. Okay, and maps we showed you all the way through to the Age of Exploration. Wow. I mean, this is just incredible. And it's actually not that difficult to prove. The 7 mountains of Eden. Here we go. Now, here's a map of the Philippines. It's 7,000 islands, right? Right, but there is a specific area where the Garden of Eden is found that is known for 7 major islands. Oh, wait, I said mountains, right? I mean, that's what Enoch said. Mountains, after the flood, became islands as the world ocean was formed. Open your books of First Enoch to chapter 32, verse 2. This is review. We've read this before, but let's go through these just real quick. And behold, these mountains I saw, another mountain to the east of the ends of the earth. So we know roughly where we are. I mean, when Enoch's talking about the ends of the earth in that area, he certainly can be talking about the edge at some point, yes, but not this point. He's not there. He's northeast of the Indian Ocean. That's not the edge of the earth in that sense. So what is he talking about? Well, when we get to the actual course of the sun over 12 months, that we map over all 12 months based on Enoch's instructions, essentially what he observed, his observations, his science, that's what you call science, then actually you will see that that is where the sun rises. But yet the sun never really rises, right? I mean, it goes around the earth for 24 hours every day. We know that, right? I mean, that's not a mystery. And obviously, Enoch's not saying any different. And we will deal, by the way, when we get to that, with the day, which is most certainly a 24-hour day in Enoch. He charts 18 hours, but it's from the east gate to the western gate. There is then a return trip that would account for the other 6 hours, probably 3 for the sun, 3 for the moon, or, proportionately attributed. So either way. So we are in the Far East, as we have already covered. And there's no doubting that. The land of the rising sun, Japan, that is well documented that was the ancient mindset. Philippines is in the same area. It's known as the land of the morning, Lupang, Hinarang. Land of the sun returning. It's all right there. Okay, so chapter 32, verse 1. To the northeast I beheld 7 mountains. Now again, what's he looking at? He's looking at the mountains that surround the Garden of Eden. That's what he's looking at, because he then sees them from above. Verse 2, and thence I went over the summits of all these mountains. So all 7, he's over top. Remember, he's being flown by angels, so he can do this. He doesn't need a plane. Far towards the east of the earth. Well, the east is where the sun rises. It's always been. That has never changed, by the way. And Yahuwah's actually the one that established what that was. But Enoch certainly does, and so does Noah in the directions from Jubilees. That is indisputable as well. And passed above the Erythraean Sea, that's the Indian Ocean in all of history. No discussion to be had on that. Done. And went far from it. Okay, so he's exited the Erythraean Sea. Okay, he went far from it. He's up in the air. Okay, he's in the sky, so he's looking down. And passed over the angel Zotiel. Why would you mention an angel in terms of this area? Because it's the Garden of Eden, and there are 2 terrible cherubim who guard it at the entrance, which means Enoch sees the entrance of. And he says, verse 3, and I came to the Garden of Righteousness, the Garden of Eden. So we have passed the Indian Ocean. At the Spice Islands of Malaysia and Indonesia, and heading northeast, there are the 7 mountains of Eden, which are over and inside, both. So he views it from both. So you'll see the Garden of Eden is what these are, not Eden in the North Pole. Let's be clear, that is a different land. The garden was planted eastward, in the east, in the far east. And that's in every possible way. And watch our different series, read our book, you'll see that we cover that in detail. As we have already made the firm connection between the land of gold, Ophir, Sheba, and Tarshish, or ancient Havilah, which was the Genesis 2, land of gold, pearl, onyx stone, before the flood, same land. And that one was named for Eve's curse of childbirth back then, which is the land of creation as well, with the Garden of Eden, basically housed within it, inside, in the earth, not up above and not in the sea. This all really comes together as now we can understand what Genesis and Jubilees define as the Mount of the East. Let's see. Again, Joktan and his sons. Joktan is the brother of Peleg, who is world famous in Scripture. It's in his days that Noah divided the earth between his 3 sons. No, there wasn't a giant earthquake, because if there was one that divided the earth in that sense, then the flood would have paled in comparison to the disaster that came just after the flood. It's the same with all these moving mountains and everything. They have basically a larger catastrophe than the flood occurring at the end of the flood. And that's from creation scientists, even Kent Hovind, and it's absolutely illiterate, unscientific, and makes no sense whatsoever. The Bible's clear: mountains don't move. Yeah, they shake, but they don't move out of their places, except for Revelation. So if you are in that time, and we're not yet, and you see the mountains move, then you can say mountains move at that time, but not until then, because they don't. They're ancient mountains and lasting hills. Thus, same family here, in which Solomon was merely reconnecting basically, at this point, with his cousins. Now, his cousins, first, along with Peleg and his family, okay, they all came from an area called Mesha, all right, which would have to be near Shinar, because the Bible's clear that all the descendants of Noah, after Noah's death, all three of his sons and their sons, grandsons, etc., all migrated to Shinar. They came from the east, which means the ark landed east of Shinar, not in Turkey, which is actually the Nephilim Mount of Salvation, in their claim for their ark to have landed, which is a rather disgusting occult infusion into scholarship today. Just, again, totally illiterate. Watch, where did Noah's ark land? So they lived in Mesha. They migrated to, as thou goest to, so they're migrating. There's movement there, okay? Sephar, a mount of the east, according to Genesis 10. And this says far more than practically all scholars have ever researched, even a little bit. And we found that in this narrative completely. The reality is they ignore it because they don't understand the importance of it. And they're not bothering to read that Sheba, Tarshish, especially by name, and even the Isles, which is Ophir, it's the Isles in the east of the ends of the earth, many times in Isaiah. You're seeing prophecies of this land in the last days. Wow. This becomes the most important land. Well, no wonder the church wouldn't want to know about it, because the church is not managed by Yahuwah. And it's not managed by Yahusha. This is not his church. He never established one. He established ecclesia, which is basically, he defined as a gathering of two or more, because there he is in their midst. This migration of Genesis 10 in about 2200 BC, where Joktan and his sons, Ophir, Sheba, Havilah, again, that's the right Sheba that the Queen of Sheba descends from, because their story is in the middle of the trip of Solomon's navy to go to Ophir. They go to Ophir, they get gold, you can see the progression, and that's what it starts with there. The Queen of Sheba heard of the wisdom of Solomon, okay, and about his, the name of his Elohim, which is really important because she knew who that was. They were cousins, and she understood. Now, they went to Sephar, which is, in Hebrew, a term for the tree of life in the Garden of Eden. Even in Kabbalah, Sephar is the highest rung of the tree of life, which is a bunch of nonsense, and a cult for that matter, but that word is applicable as Hebrew goes. Then you have the Mount of the East. Again, it's not a mount, it's the mountain. Yahuwah's holy mountain in the Garden of Eden is firmly going to this very same land that Enoch traveled to, the Garden of Eden in the Philippines, northeast of the Indian Ocean. Again, that's not up for debate. There's nothing else there. Ophir and brothers were following Enoch's journey, and they knew where they were going. They had a map, or written directions from Enoch. That's what ancient maps are. We don't have any maps from ancient times, from the 1st century and before. Those are all reconstructions, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. We have the directions, and again, as I said in the last video, I think it's actually better to have the directions, because then all of us can affirm and confirm what those cartographers are doing and not doing, and what they're maybe skipping, because they do in these directions. We even find archaeology in Taiwan and Vietnam very shortly after this period, about 1500 to 2000 BC, in multiple finds that prove, yes, we quote science journals for that, so go and read the book and the source book. It's all there. It proves the Philippines, or ancient Ophir, was already trading cross-regionally across the South China Sea and to the north at that time. Wow. So it didn't take them long to start to establish reaching out to their neighbors. They had ships, of course. The ships of Tarshish, which is what they came on, which is why the ships of Tarshish are so famous. This voyage is that important. Read the book and source book for evidence. It's all there. As well, the Chinese record, basically, in a scroll, shows that Filipinos were showing up in their port in Canton to trade in 990 BC. That's still 20 years before Solomon. Wow. Which also fits Ophir. Now, that's according to a Chinese scroll interpreted by Sir Douglas of the British Museum, of all people. Even so, the British had this data, no doubt, but couldn't understand it because, of course, they ignore the Philippines and all about the Philippines in every way, in ignorance, in their supposed scholarship or academia. It's really called stupid. Joktan and his sons lived in Mesha, or Mashhad, Iran. Again, we prove that out. We don't just say it. And it's not because it just sounds the same. No. It's also according to Josephus, who places them exactly there. It's according to the book of Jubilees, who gives us the geography of our Faksad and his generations, of which Joktan and Ophir descend from. So it identifies this very firmly. We know this. We cover that. However, the capital of the world then, at that time, where they would travel regularly to pay taxes, was Shinar, on the east side of the Tigris River. Again, that's so well documented, even outside of the Bible. That is history. And to think that the Bible doesn't have history, you've got to be kidding. One of the oldest books of all time, really the oldest in reality, in true assessments, how could it not be considered history? It is living and breathing history. Oh, it's not a history textbook, but hey, those were written in the, 70s, 80s, 90s? Really? You call that history? That's not history. It's rewritten in many cases as well, so it's ignorance is what it is. It is clear the ships of Tarshish, basically Tarshish was the Greek Isles, made this journey over basically around Africa to the Persian Gulf. And Ophir and brothers, either they boarded there on the Tigris, or more than likely they had to take ships down the Tigris to meet up with Tarshish in the Persian Gulf. We don't know which. We don't need to know. We know this happened because the Bible says so, and it's very clear. Either way, this is how Tarshish gets involved. And by the way, the next video is going to nail this down with an account from the Archangel Michael that's going to blow you away. Okay, so basically, this is how Tarshish gets involved, which history even affirms, much. The Spanish knew this narrative, and Father Colin, in fact, in the 1600s still, said that Tarshish came to the Philippines and brought Ophir and brothers, Havilah and brothers. So, and he even says they came from India. And when you look at ancient maps, India actually went all the way over to that portion of Iran back in those days in many assessments. So actually very, very accurate. And it's amazing that that's there, that record's there in history, written history, yet, of course, ignored. This is how Tarshish from Japheth gets involved in this journey. Again, that historic quote is in the book, so read it. And received land as payment in the Philippines, or ancient Ophir, just by logic, very obviously, because he certainly has territory there, and he got it somehow, right? And we know that the ships of Tarshish are famous for taking Ophir there to return to the ancient land of Havilah. So he received, it looks like Mindanao, essentially, it appears. We do not need a direct track yet. We're going to get one. Next video, wait for it. From a fragment in the Qumran Scrolls, it's going to blow you away. It affirms the mountains of the east in this fragment, including the Archangel Gabriel, who is where? Well, in the Garden of Eden. Hello. It connects the migration of Ophir from Shinar to that land of the Garden of Eden. It's good, which is what Genesis really has always said. It also labels these same mountains, but instead of just the 7 mountains of Eden, like we see here in Enoch, he identifies 9 mountains, but he expands it, of the east. So it's a larger region and this is going to be good. It's so good. Maybe if academia and scholarship would stop ignoring ancient history and get their heads out of the sand, they could actually find these things because it's not that difficult. But see, that is not their paradigm. Their paradigm instead is to ridicule the truth. Yeah, well, you can keep doing that, but you're going to look like a fool here. That box they live in is not allowed, right? They're not allowed to do that. And we cannot imagine anything more stupid than an historian ignoring history. Huh? Even if you don't like it, it's written, you don't ignore it. Well, they do. Nor a so-called Bible scholar ignoring the Bible, as both of these writings, Jubilees and Enoch, were found in the Qumran scrolls, as well as Bible canon kept by the only keepers of Scripture. You would think they would know this, right? It's right there in Deuteronomy. It's right there. You really can't miss that Moses gave this authority to keep Scripture to the Levite priests, who eventually would be, when the temple was built, in charge of the temple worship, and they kept Scripture. They're the only ones who did. Wow. Doesn't mean people didn't have scrolls, but they were the official library, or Bible canon, we would call it today. Those were the exiled temple priests, and they were exiled to Qumran, where we found that library, the sons of Zadok, a temple priest leadership, exiled. Oh, and by the way, the scrolls of Qumran are placed in date, at least the 2nd century BC for copies, by the way. If you ever read a completely, illiterate, article, blog, review, whatever, with accusation that, well, let's say, for instance, this one, that we say that the New Testament was not Scripture because it wasn't found in Qumran. Now, that's so stupid, because we say that was Bible canon to that point many times. Obviously, that's a deceiving, lying piece of filth who should be in prison. This is fraud, and we never say anything like that, of course. But instead, we use the New Testament to affirm these scrolls, as it was written after that. Hard to imagine. This is also the same journey and directions undertaken by Solomon's navy in 970 BC, who also had the first book of Enoch at their disposal. We know definitively. Yes, we know this because Noah brought it over the flood and still taught it till the day he died. Again, read the introduction. We prove that. Also, Abraham received it and learned and taught from first Enoch and passed it down to his generations. We cover that too. He passed this to Isaac and Jacob, who passed it to Levi, whose family kept it, the Bible canon. And they kept it all the way through to the 1st century. We found their Bible canon, the Levite library, the Levite Bible we call it, in Qumran, Bethabara. If you haven't, reviewed the introduction, check it out. Especially if you've heard these were Essenes. That is the dumbest, uneducated lie out there. I mean, those people can't even read, obviously. I know they're scholars, and yes, they're smart people. They can read writings, but they can't comprehend, so they can't really read. Again, check out our introduction if you haven't. Try to debate that point and any of these that are based on massive research elsewhere. You'll be muted here. No, you don't get to debate in ignorance. You need to review our position first. Our channel, our rules. Also, notice, King David, as we cover, had already somehow gotten some of the gold of Ophir before Solomon's navy. Again, we covered that in the book. This is because Ophir, ancient Filipinos, were trading in the Indian Ocean to Africa since ancient times. I mean, we even can affirm definitively, basically at least 200 BC, along with the very ships used by the Philippines to go that far, and those ships have been found in archaeology even, dated to 320 AD, which blows everything that you hear about Philippine history out of the water just right there, yet swept under the carpet and not understood, not even trying. Most do not know any of this history, even Filipinos, unfortunately, and that includes professors and teachers, and most especially Bible scholars, who know nothing of this for the most part. That's what we're finding in our research. Solomon was following the pattern of Ophir's migration, which is the pattern established by first Enoch. There you have it. Remember also, for the Mount of the East, this is a very distinct mountain in the Garden of Eden. Jubilees 4:26 is clear. There's 4 holy places of Yahuwah on earth. The Garden of Eden and the Mount of the East are one. And this mountain on which thou art today, Mount Sinai and Mount Zion. So there's 3 holy mountains, there's 3 holy places. The one holy place has 2. And that's why Garden of Eden, Mount of the East are in the same place. We also know this because Enoch sacrificed on that Mount of the East when he entered the Garden of Eden in Jubilees. So that's all there. There's nothing vague about this at all. Again, we prove all of this out in great detail. This is within these mountains of Eden and the Archangel Michael's mountains of the East as well. All this ties and makes perfect sense. It's a shame that scholarship has lost what the Mount of the East is. They don't have a clue. So they think, oh, just a mount somewhere in the East. Well, grow up, expert, and do what you're supposed to do. Research rather than being a puppet. That's the reality here. Now, that was on the surface of the earth, and we're going to go first. We'll get to the spices. We're going to do those last. However, let's go back to the inside of the earth as Enoch describes these same 7 mountains of Eden when he is near the tree of life, which is where? In the midst of the Garden of Eden. We know where he is. We know where these mountains are, inside and above the earth. Well, on the surface anyway. Turn back to chapter 18, verse 6. Let's read, and then we will map. And I proceeded and saw a place which burns day and night. Okay, so we've got fire, we've got volcanoes, basically. Where there are 7 mountains of magnificent stones, which volcanoes produce largely. 3 towards the east and 3 towards the south. We're going to map these. And as for those towards the east, one was of colored stone, and one of pearl, and one of jacinth, and those toward the south of red stone. So this is data as researchers that we can dig into and really locate this, especially he just gave us the geography of this area. So does the Philippines fit it? Let's see. Now this becomes incredibly specific and fascinating. Check this out. Verse 8. But the middle one reached to heaven like the throne of Elohim of alabaster, and the summit of the throne was sapphire. Okay, now what is that? What could this mountain of alabaster be? This is going to raise the hairs on the back of your neck. You wait. Verse 9, and I saw a flaming fire, again, volcanoes, and beyond these mountains is a region, the end of the great earth. Now there the heavens were completed. Oh my. The land of creation, perhaps? Let's map this, and we will support the resources listed here along the way. Enoch describes 3 mountains in this formation to the east, and get this, one founded on top of another. Wow. This is an exact match to the 7 mountains of Visayas, the 7 major mountains there, or what we would call islands today after the flood. We're not talking about mountains that are on the islands. The entire island is an ancient mountain before the flood, because the ocean floor was mostly dry land before the flood. As 2 Esdras tells us 3 times, the earth was 1/7 water before the flood. It's about 15%, compared to 70% today. Therefore, an entirely different ecosystem. And no, scientists don't know anything if they ignore this about the pre-flood world, nor can they date anything, not accurately. Now, this is specifically Masbate, Samar, and Leyte, which most certainly are on top of one another even. Wow. Could Enoch nail this any better? Oh, he will. Don't worry. Remember now, we are inside the earth where Enoch saw these precious stones, etc. He didn't need mining equipment. In fact, the Philippines never needed mining equipment in ancient times, even for gold. Pigafetta records, in fact, an entire valley of gold. Read the book. A valley. You heard that, right? Not a mountain. And it was on the surface. The gold was on the ground, basically. This was in North Mindanao in a place he calls Chipit, west of Butuan and Cagayan de Oro, the city of gold, in fact, in name even. Likely Dapitan, I guess. We don't quite know exactly where it is, but somewhere near there, somewhere in northern Mindanao on the western side. However, these were what is known as alluvial gold deposits. That's something, especially in the gold business, they know very well what they are and were, and that they did exist. It's well proven. But see, that requires no mining equipment. Any scholar or academic demanding one produce mining equipment from 970 BC, I mean, you want to talk about laughable? I mean, that's a belly laugh there. Because for gold, that's illiterate. They don't understand the narrative nor the history. They don't even understand ancient gold mining, and they prove themselves completely ignorant of it. So just shut them down right away when you hear it. These are not scholars on this subject. You can be the scholar, and you can tell them, because they clearly don't realize that's the case. In fact, the king of Butuan came to Magellan's ship. Again, this is in Pigafetta's journal, and we cover it in the book, and it's in the source book. He came to Magellan's ship to welcome him, gifting a gold nugget the size of a chicken egg. Wow. Pigafetta records this king of Butuan told Magellan that he acquired this large nugget of gold by simply sifting in the ground. What? Yes, gold was sitting on the ground or just below the surface. Those are called alluvial deposits, an historical, scientific fact. What else would you expect from the land of gold? Of course. Now, we even ran into folks down in Mindanao who told the story of a rice farmer who was prepping to plant, and he discovered he had a field of gold deposits just below the surface, and that was in recent years. We didn't go there, so we can't confirm it. We haven't. We have no need to and no desire to. But if true, and I'm sure that it is, this is very consistent with the very same. You also have Philippine legends from ancient times, passed down orally over many generations, where the characters just bend down and pick up gold from the ground or streams. So this is not a mystery. It's actually pretty well documented. And again, Pigafetta's journal is called history, folks. And for modern academia to ignore these parts of it is absolutely illiterate. But what archaeology do the academics demand? What, a basket? Because that's all they would need. No mining equipment was needed. That's not real bright. However, is there history of gemstones and pearl in the Philippines? Yes, we have actually some attempt to claim the answer is no. But once again, that is illiterate of Philippine history. Nuh-uh, doesn't cut it. You got to prove it, and you can't because Philippine history says and it is the end of the discussion. While in Palawan visiting for the first time, Magellan's historian Pigafetta records pearls and precious stones, there you are, in writing, as well as lots of gold in application. You can see it several times. You'll see that at first He'll even tell you that their first encounters, they weren't seeing any gold, really. And it kind of disturbed them because they thought they were in the land of gold. I mean, that's what Pigafetta's really describing there. And then he says, but later we realized that they were just holding back, and then we saw gold everywhere. And he writes of it everywhere. You imagine an application for it. It's there. There's gold on ships. The men wore gold earrings, gold necklaces, gold chains around their, a sacred thread around their shoulder and all the way down to their waist. They had belts of fine gold. By the way, these are illustrated in the Boxer Codex in about 1590 and affirmed in archaeology. These are rare pieces of gold pictured, and you look at the picture and you look at what was found in the Surigao treasure, and they're an exact match in piece. So this is a full circle proven fact. Let's be clear. Then just off the coast of Mindanao, Pigafetta describes islands where pearls are found. In the ocean, of course, he's talking about clams. We know these as giant pearls, which impressed everyone and always have, which the Philippines is famous for those. They were smaller back then. They get larger over time. Why? Because that's an impediment. That's actually something that forms in a clam's mouth that grows over time. So you can actually measure it, and you can assess a rough dating as to when that pearl was being formed in that clam's mouth. And yes, today, some go back 3,000 years. Wow. That's when Solomon's Navy was crossing over the seas of the Philippines. In Cagayan, it appears de oro, this is, a record of gold and precious stones. There's also an island, Cagayan, Sulu, just off the coast there, too, on the western side of Mindanao, but around Mindanao either way. This is no surprise, of course, for anyone familiar, to see gold, precious stones in so many places. Not only with history, but the Philippines today, which remains rich in resources. It's ranked number 5 on all of Earth, folks, for all resources generally. Wow. And it's a quarter the size of the 4 countries that are ahead of it on the list. Thus, not actually a true comparison for that matter. And we cover that in the book as well. Also, the Philippines remains number 2 in gold deposits in the ground on all of Earth, according to the Fraser Institute, who studies such worldwide. They're the experts, not us. They employed the help of NASA, in fact, and they have basically scanned the ground throughout the Earth and determined where the largest deposits of gold are. That study was released and reported in Forbes, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and very credible resources. So it's fact, folks. The number 1 was South Africa, but it has no ancient application of gold, not even discovering gold panning for that matter, until 1000 AD, according to its own universities and its own history. That's 2,000 years too late to be Ophir as well, as they have no history of Ophir at all. They're in the wrong direction. They're the wrong territory, as it must be in Shems, not Hams. They're lacking the additional resources that are listed there in Scripture of Ophir and Tarshish, and just plain wrong, as are all other claims. We address them all pretty much in the book. We have a whole chapter called Not Ophir. Read it. Let's go back to Havilah, though, the land of Eve, named for Havah. That's her actual Hebrew name. She's never been named Eve, and why they couldn't just call it Havah in the first place. Although, in all fairness, it's not Havah, it's Hawa. Many pointed that out. There's no V in ancient Hebrew, so that's a W. But regardless, they just screw up everything they possibly can. But we can put this together, guys. We can do it, all of us. And where Adam and Eve basically lived all the way to Noah, including Enoch in between, before he was taken. And then he stayed near there, in fact, because he just went into the Garden of Eden, which is right there, which he was visited by Methuselah and Noah, both. Yes, he came out of the garden. They weren't allowed in. But regardless, the fact that they could get there means they lived in the same land in that era. Wow. See, this just proves itself out so many times over. Havilah is defined by three resources. Let's deal with this quickly. Gold in abundance. Again, we cover this in the book. Resources are all in the source book. It's all there. We nail this down. Gold in abundance, or the land of gold, because it says the gold there is taub, or abundant, is what that means. And that is the Philippines in all of history. It just is. That's fact. Now, we prove that, again, even ancient gold mining, and we have lots of sources in many ways. No one can disprove it, and no one has in 5+ years. Then there is pearl, we say, right? No, that's what the Bible says. Here's what scholars debate, just to make it simple for you. And the one side is completely illiterate. I don't understand how they can even make such a suggestion, because it's fraud from the beginning. They say bdellium, because it's gold, bdellium, and the onyx stone. So they say bdellium is either pearl or an African resin. Now, say they begin right away in fraud. There's nothing to even debate, because that's not an African resin. That resin is also found in the Philippines. So it's already really, really very stupid to even suggest it as an African resin. But the African one's called bdellium. Not by the Bible, by the way. That's more modern times. It's never listed as a resin. No, not bdellium. Or a spice, same thing, in the Bible. It's just not there. The only other time this word is used in Scripture is Numbers 11:7, where Israel ate manna the color of bdellium. Now, this fixes this right away. The end of debate. I mean, there's a whole 2 scriptures to look up here, scholars. 2. And really, you just read 1 already to get the narrative. So all you have to do is look up the one other time that this is used in all of Scripture to see how foolish it is to claim this an African resin. Look at the picture to the right. Did Israelites eat that nasty, yucky looking stuff fraudulently called African resin, but also found in the Philippines too, or the color of pearl, white? The manna was white. This is obvious, and there is no debate. It's already settled just by simple logic. It's pearl. So, how does the Philippines rank in pearl? Well, just number 1, of course. Yet again, that's 2 for 3. Number 1 and number 1 on all of Earth for both gold and pearl. Is there really anything to discuss here? When Guinness began keeping track of the largest pearl on Earth in the 1930s, in fact, that pearl was 15 kilos. That's pretty big, and it originated in the Palawan Sea, the Philippines. Today, the record belongs to the Puerto Princesa pearl, as you see on screen, which, you guessed it, that's named for Puerto Princesa, Palawan, in the Philippines. It weighs in at 34 kilograms, or for those that aren't as familiar, us Americans, that's 75 pounds. Wow. These are the largest pearls on Earth by far. By the way, the Philippines has the number 2, the number 3, the number 4, the number 5, and so on and so on and so on. Largest pearls found to date. So there isn't anybody else. There's not even a second. Every largest pearl on Earth originates in the Philippines. I know there was one who tried to claim, well, in Canada, there's a news report that in Canada they found a large pearl, 28 kilos. They thought it was a rock. It was a family. They thought they had a rock, and they had it tested, and it was pearl. And yeah, that story's true. Impressive, Mom, right? But that's a commercial in the Philippines if you haven't heard it. It's kind of funny. Anyway, but one little minor detail they overlooked, and they eventually apologized for it, the person that said it. That pearl, it was found in Canada in their home, but it was the home of an OFW Philippine family whose father brought that pearl from the Palawan Sea. There is no competition. There's no one else in the running. There's no one else even on the list. Period. There's no other claim of any substance. Only the Philippines fits these narratives, in fact, and is the ancient land of gold and pearl and the onyx stone and the Garden of Eden. Now for jacinth. This one seems to elude the modern world mostly. This was actually one of the gemstones in the breastplate of the high priest in Israel, very significant. And we see it in New Jerusalem in the last days. And it appears they may have actually lost the reference. That's what it says in many of these cases, according to Wikipedia. And let's be clear, they have picked just about every color for this stone. When you look at all the many different sources out there, they're all over the map on it. But Wikipedia says it's a yellow-red to a red-brown stone that they equate to a modern application, but there's really no actual track to that particular stone. Sources say it could also be red, yellow, brown, blue, purple, you name it, really. But regardless, we don't have a full track here. All these colors are found in the Philippines, no doubt, but there is an historic precedence among the ancient Filipinos for cornelians and agates mentioned in history when the Spanish came shortly after. Both a reddish-orange color pictured on screen to the left and the right that were used to make jewelry beads, according to Antonio de Morga, in 1609. That's pretty far back there. The agate bead necklace on the right is actually a necklace found in Vietnam, traded by the Philippines. And that's what most think is the case. So its origin is the Philippines from 3,000 years ago. Wow. That's the time of King Solomon. That is ancient, my friends. It seems to us to be the best option here for what we're seeing. We don't know exactly, and so we'll just say that. But here's what we do know, and this is certain. If this stone is so significant that it is mentioned in the breastplate of the high priest who went before Yahuwah's Holy of Holies, then it, in origin, originates in the Philippines, at least a version of it, which is the original version. And that is where Enoch is here in this whole narrative. So Enoch just told us this has to originate in the Philippines. See, they're looking in the wrong places. They're looking at the Greeks. They're looking at what the British say. Those are all much, much later. We need a more ancient application here. This necklace pictured is very ancient. So that might assist scholars in nailing this down. We can't give you 100% on this, but these seem likely. But there are so many options. If it's not found in the Philippines, however, it cannot be jacinth. Even the gold of Ophir is said in, I think it's Tobit 13:17, I want to say. I might have that wrong, but it's off the top of my head. But he says that the streets of New Jerusalem, we know that they'll be paved with gold, but did you know that Tobit says they will be paved with the gold of Ophir? Wow, the Philippines. Doesn't mean it isn't found elsewhere, but it must be found in the Philippines, period. Now, the second grouping in geography Enoch describes is mountains or islands after the flood, now towards the south. 3. In Visayas, this is a perfect fit to the orientation of the 7 islands in Negros, Cebu, and Bohol. All 3 in the south in a row there. And once again, Enoch says it appears one is on top of the other, and indeed, these do. This area is known from within the earth for red stone. Now, what could that be? Red stone in history We see many colors for gemstones in the Philippines. So really you could take any color and pretty much find it. Okay, so let's just say that, so that is very clear. There were and remain many options, no doubt about it. But let's look at red today. That is being mined on Cebu, especially. Now, here we go. There are garnet mines today which produce a red garnet in Cebu. However, there's also mines on Negros, Cebu, and Bohol, all three of these southern islands exactly as described, that actually are mining the same red gemstone from all three islands, which of course were mountains from within, of course. It's actually called the cuprite, and it's being mined basically in modern times, as you see pictured there. This is according to minedat.org, which is an amazing amount of data on this website for these. You should check it out. It's really cool. You can click the map and go right to the mine in that area and see what they're mining. It's very fascinating. In terms of exactly what Enoch saw, this is actually the best match because it is in all three islands listed as the southern group of three, and it's the red gemstone, certainly. Also, though, there is another red gem called neodicite with 2 mines on Negros and 1 in Bohol. Now, not currently being mined in Cebu. It doesn't mean it's not there, but it's not. So, now that's a deeper, darker red, at times also brown even. So really that one's just a maybe, whereas it seems the cuprite is the clear option based on today's mining information. The real point, there most certainly was and is a red stone found within the mountains, the islands of the Philippines, in these 3 islands, the exact orientation Enoch describes as having red stone. Wow. Then Enoch deals with the middle mountain or island now for the 7th. He dealt with 6 already. But this is interesting. Remember, there has been a worldwide flood that originated in mega tsunamis from the fountains of the Great Deep, which, by the way, there are some right next to the Philippines, which would have done major damage and did. You can see the carvings all over the place. They're just not attributing them to mega tsunamis because they ignore that the flood even happened. Destroying portions of these ancient mountains, now islands, leaving erosion and damage very plain and clear to the naked eye today. Now, we have odd markings all over Earth, even some very weird, mountain formations, and they'll argue back and forth, well, this could only be created by, yet they never consider mega tsunamis that may have hit the not quite at the top of the mountain, and that's why the bottom of the mountain seems carved out all the way up to that point, and then the top seems to be falling. Well, that's because the tsunami hit the bottom to the middle to the lower top, maybe. I mean, it's really not that difficult, but they don't even consider it. They don't even consider it. So it would leave, markings indeed. But also we have marine fossils found on top of every mountain range on Earth, even Everest and the Himalayas. I know they say they rise out of the sea, but please explain to me, what sea did the Himalayas rise over 5 miles into the sky out of? It's a stupid theory, easily disproven by simple logic. Failed before it even started. The Himalayas is not growing either. We hear that so many times, and it's the dumbest thing. We sure would like to meet the idiot scientist who climbs Mount Everest, removes the ice, and measures it, especially before anyone ever did, because that's what they'd have to do according to the stupid theory, and then claim it was, 2 inches shorter. than 2 centuries ago, or whatever it is. It's a ridiculous number like that. It's like, what? How would you even know? How could you even tell? You couldn't. These are idiots, not scientists. They're just saying blah, whatever comes out of their mouth, and it is just illiteracy. This middle mountain, however, which is Panay, and it appears included some islands next to it, for that is, what's that there? Ramblan. Probably was part of Panay before the flood. Panay is also oddly a direct Hebrew word, letter for letter, essentially. It strangely means overlooking. Overlooking what? Now that's a fit. Overlooking the garden, perhaps. A face. Whose face? Yahuwah's. Overlooking Yahuwah's face. Overlooking his Holy of Holies in the Garden of Eden. I mean, wow. That is amazing. However, next to it is Ramblan, which is known for the strongest onyx and marble stone on earth. Yes, stronger than Italy. But wait a minute. Wait. No, Enoch called this alabaster, right? I mean, that's not onyx, is it? Ah, but it is in ancient times. Check this out. Actually, we know in archaeology what was called alabaster in Egypt in ancient times has been scientifically tested, and it's not what we call alabaster from gypsum today. That's not what it is. It's brown or yellow onyx stone. Boom! That is the ancient onyx of Genesis 2 and Enoch's alabaster. All the same, the British don't know this, but it's in their own encyclopedia. They clearly can't read that either. Again, Genesis 2 defines the third resource as the onyx stone. And here we have a third ranking for the Philippines as, drumroll, number 1 on all of Earth. The literal embodiment of the land of gold, pearl, and onyx stone in antiquity, and still provable scientifically this very day, proven. Indisputable by science. Done. This is the land of Adam and Eve, where Enoch lived, and Noah built the ark, which houses the Garden of Eden and the very holy of holies of Yahuwah, lined the walls and the ceiling with the gold of Ophir, or ancient Havilah, it was called before the flood. And it's just within or beneath the earth, okay? The Philippines is above it. It's not in the sea. It's not on land, and we're not saying that. We've never said that. We get that ridicule all the time, and we've never said either. But in the earth's interior, as the garden is enclosed with one entrance, Enoch already told us the tree of life is inside the earth, not up here. So Scripture and the Hebrew definition even are very clear. The Hebrew garden is enclosure garden, enclosed garden, boom. Pretty easy. So this is not actually up for debate, and the Bible does not have multiple interpretations. Only one can be accurate, as no prophet wrote flexible theology, nor especially geography. I mean, the notion is utterly stupid when you think about it, and should never enter the halls of scholarship, yet that is their foundation on many topics, and it's dumb. That is a false paradigm from the start. You would think they could see this, but they can't because they're stuck in a paradigm. So is ours the only way to look at this? Well, no, this isn't ours. Let's be clear. We aren't offering an interpretation, folks. We're proving. This is thorough research, which arrives at a conclusion that it deserves. No one can disprove this. Thus, this is proven fact. Call us whatever you want. This is accurate, and try to prove it wrong. No one has in over 5 years. Genesis 2 geography is proven fact. Solomon knew this. Ophir and family knew this. And we showed you in the last 2 videos, this history survives all the way until the age of exploration. The mindset is there and well after. Well, better than that, this is now restored today as it is proven. It matters not who does or does not embrace it. It doesn't matter how many people watch this video or read the book. It doesn't make it untrue. The fact is, this is proven, period. Again, the first globe map of the Earth, commissioned by the Portuguese government. I mean, some dude didn't just draw this. This is based on the Portuguese government official exploration of territories in the Indies, which they controlled largely at this time in 1492 when Columbus sailed the ocean blue with this same data in mind. And that's what he records in his journals and notes. So that is true and fact. The behind globe finds the ancient land of gold, which is labeled right there on Luzon Island, Philippines as Christ in Greek, which is Ophir in Hebrew, which is the Garden of Eden land as well. Did Bahaim know that? Perhaps not. He's just basically drawing the data out. Doesn't matter whether he ever did or not. We know, because we know this fits the ancient perspective, which track goes all the way back to first Enoch and Jubilees. Then there are the basically the land of silver, Argyre in Greek, written on Mindanao. I mean, it's right there. That's Mindanao, indisputably, which is the biblical Tarshish, land of silver. Then there are the two other resources of ancient Tavila, right here, in which define it. On the map, Thilis, the ancient famous land of pearl, as Palawan, and the Philippines, even known as the Pearl of the Orient in history by name as well. And there's a reason for that. It is. And though not labeled, there's Ramblan as well. You can see on the map the land of the strongest onyx on Earth. In other words, this map finds the elements of Havilah in definition by these resources as the Philippines. Indisputably, that's Havilah. This is where Columbus said he was headed, though he failed because that unknown continent, well, it was in the way, the one called America. It is also where Magellan was headed and landed. He found the lands of gold and silver of Solomon and Ophir and ancient Havilah, just as he planned. It's all so plain, and it's all right there. And no other land has this. I mean, they try to argue in scholarship and in academia, and the dumbest of arguments with no support whatsoever, a scant etymology. Oh, well, this could be Ophir because it sounds familiar. It sounds similar. Really? Compared to all this? Have you watched the last few videos? I mean, you got to be kidding me. And then read the book and watch the other series. Oh my goodness, this is so overwhelming. There's nothing to discuss here. No other land can produce this history. No other land has illustrations of its people as the wealthiest in all of history. The Philippines does. It's called the Boxer Codex in 1590. And again, those pieces found in archaeology, firm, full circle. Again, archaeology proves this. Resources prove this. The presence of gold proves this. The matches to the other biblical narratives and resources. I mean, there's just nothing to discuss here. The science, indisputable. Even the land of creation and the center of the center, marine biodiversity. There is no number two. No other possibility. This is the settled fact of it all. Enoch just serves to seal this up. Yet again, from another direction, and really bring it home, which we love, the British ignored the number one and only option completely in willing ignorance. And all their theories are ridiculous and bogus propaganda. We deal with them in the book, so go read it. But very obviously so. I mean, this becomes so blatant that it's propaganda, and there's just no denying this is the truth. This is the fact. I don't care who says it isn't. And we really don't care what academic wants to say, no, they can say whatever they want, but they can't prove it wrong, and they won't. Then you have the rivers from Eden, which must match. Must. And that's why we went down that route. We didn't want to initially. We weren't even going to the Garden of Eden initially. We were blowing that off. We weren't going to head there until we found actual directions in the book of Jubilees and started really researching it at that point, and it became so super obvious. But those rivers must be on the bottom of the ocean floor. Again, according to Second Esdras, the earth was only 15% water before. If you fill in those trenches that you see, they're very deep, by the way. Some, 7 miles deep, I think, and some 19 miles wide. I mean, these are massive in volume. It's about 10% of the earth or so, something like that. We cover the actual figures in the book. I'm doing this off the top of my head. But it's all there. And then you add lakes, which Jubilee says there are lakes before the flood too, which would be, at the bottom of the ocean floor, basins, what we call basins today, such as the Bay of Bengal, which we say, Enoch was crossing. It's a 100% match to Genesis 2 here, which also places the Pison River as the modern trench system after the flood that travels up the coast of North America, Alaska, over to Russia, down to Japan. It splits and surrounds the whole land of Havila, the Philippines, as the Philippine Trench, Manila Trench, Negros Trench, and the Sulu Basin, basically serving as an antediluvian lake. Basically, the Philippines was an island before the flood. Now it's 7,000 islands, but it was one island before the flood. Ancient Havila, the land of Adam and Eve, is the Philippines. Then we have more affirmation for Enoch, as this area must be a volcanic area as well. Now, that within itself doesn't pinpoint it. There's volcanoes all over the earth, but it affirms the Philippines, which we already found. So it's nice affirmation. It certainly fits. He says there the heavens were completed, which, okay, this could have two meanings. It could have one or the other, and it doesn't matter which, really, but let's just cover this. Basically, either is fine. Either it references the actual land of creation, which is what it appears to say to us, which Ancient Havila proves to be according to Genesis and Jubilees, we already covered, or it could possibly refer to the lands beyond the Philippines, which we're going to go to later in mapping, at the very edge of the earth. Now, Enoch travels there, and that's where the firmament is attached to the earth. So he could literally be talking about the literal attaching of the firmament at that point. Either works, but we see it more likely a reference to the land of creation. That would not change anything, however. Either way. Then we have these same 7 mountains of Eden defined from the surface of the earth by Enoch, by the spices especially. And we're going to go through this quick because we've already kind of covered this, but we've got a little more to add. These 7 mountains, or islands today, are full of nard, mastic, cinnamon, and pepper trees, says Enoch. Now, what does history say about this? Antonio Pigafetta records gold, of course, as well as cinnamon and pepper trees he's talking about, near Samar. Note the Spanish did not plant these. Well, certainly not before they actually came, did they? No, couldn't happen. See, that would be what they call circular reasoning, for those who did not understand the term before. Of course, these were native and already growing. In Palawan, Pigafetta observed they were served cinnamon, and notice in this passage all the gold references as well. They're always gold all around the Philippines. It's amazing. Now, around Mindanao here, Pigafetta describes the best cinnamon of any grows there. Wow! Imagine that. I mean, I don't know. Does he just mean of any in the Philippines, perhaps? Maybe. But it sure does seem to be a broader reference. Doesn't matter, however. The point is, cinnamon grows there, and it's good cinnamon. They traded for 17 pounds of it, so they took it pretty seriously. Wow. Of course, the Spanish traded 2 big knives that, well, the story, according to Pigafetta, a Spaniard, well, sailing for Spain anyway. I believe he was Italian. But anyway, they stole from the governor of Palawan, when they captured his junk ship, which they attacked him, as these colonialists were actually behaved like pirates and really scum of the earth in their behavior, and this is their right. I mean, you go to someone else's country and claim to rule their seas, and you haven't even been there hardly at all. They don't even know who you are. They don't know who your king is that you're demanding allegiance to and tribute. You're supposed to pay some king you know nothing about. And then they burned down villages, and they captured ships, they stole, they killed, destroyed. I mean, those are the fruits of Satan. They were not bringing Jesus. They were bringing Satan. Let's be clear. Now, imagine how much worse they were, because this is what they say. At least they traded for the cinnamon this time and didn't just try to steal it, so at least that. But he then describes the native cinnamon tree growing in the Philippines, and you can see the description there. You can stop and read it if you want. I'm not going to go through it all, but that's when the Spanish came. Yet, illiterate scholars out there who forget the Philippines has cinnamon natively and in antiquity, they'll leave the Philippines off of such lists and just ignore that the Philippines even has cinnamon. Yet, still does to this day. It's called Cebu cinnamon. Called willing ignorance, and that is the British tactic on this topic. Notice, too, the likely origin of cinnamon, for that matter, etymologically. And this is really cool. In Visayas, the locals called it cane, meaning wood, manna, cane manna, cinnamon. Now that's interesting. Manna meaning sweet. Manna is also the bread, right, in Hebrew, or the pellets that they made bread with in the wilderness. Very odd, because of course the name Cain is also Hebrew. Might this actually lead to a more ancient lost story? Maybe even of Cain discovering this wood, cinnamon, as sweet perhaps? We don't know. We may never know. But no surprise for the land of Adam and Eve, if so. Those are the kinds of things that make perfect sense. Of course, he turned evil, killed his brother, and left to the east. But what about when he was a boy, perhaps? I mean, I'm just saying. That's speculation, but we don't do a lot of that. But one other thing here in the last paragraph. Notice the Spanish also admit they hijacked or pirated a Bignadai, I don't know how you say that, boat. Okay, so this is like a Portuguese prahu, but a Philippine design, and it's a decent-sized ship. It's not as large as the Balangay, and it's not as large, of course, as the junk ships, but it's a decent-sized ship. The crew dared to defend themselves for freely sailing, well, on their own ship, in their own seas. Imagine that. Who do they think they are? How dare they, right? So, the Spanish murdered them. That's what they say. Because, well, they wouldn't surrender their ship for no reason at all, illegally. Are you kidding? Notice these were muscular men, it appears to state, which is cool. So they were fighters. Maybe Pacquiao's ancestor was there? Who knows? Anyway, this is what the Spanish represented as a first impression. Basically, the very fruits of Satan. Murderers and thieves, pirates, not explorers. They were not explorers. Explorers shouldn't behave this way. They should be making friends, right? Yes, he did make some friends. If you did everything he said and paid him tribute, he'd be your great friend. But if you didn't, he'd burn your villages and kill you. Ophir already traded all the way to Africa at that time and long before into the BC era. However, now they would face an evil power of thugs and pirates who wouldn't trade sometimes, but would just take, with no morality whatsoever. Yet they call themselves Christians. And many wonder and even demonize Lapu-Lapu. There was a movie that did that from Portugal that was among the most disgusting pieces of propaganda imaginable. We covered that in 100 Clues. The Philippines was Ophir. I don't remember what numbers, but you could find it. Anyway, but because Lapu-Lapu killed Magellan, they make him out to be the bad guy. What? No. Good for him. He did the right thing. First of all, he didn't attack Magellan, Magellan attacked him. First, he was defending his land and people. Magellan, before that even, in another event, burned a village on his island there. And he came and he attacked Lapu-Lapu, not the other way around. So talk about backwards reasoning to justify the evil of colonialism, which is the most ridiculous of all concepts, to think that one man would say, you know, because I'm more educated and wealthier than you, I get to take your stuff, rape your wife, and steal everything you have, and, well, just kill you. I mean, because you have no value because I have stuff. Are you kidding me? That's so, I mean, that is as evil as you get. That's satanic, and actually, that is the Nephilim doctrine from before the flood. That is exactly how the giants, how the Nephilim behaved. They saw humankind as a lesser species. Oh, that's evolution? Yeah, evolution is a Nephilim doctrine, not an actual theory, because it's stupid and disproven very easily, even by Charles Darwin himself. These spices, the pepper tree and cinnamon, are native to the Philippines and documented by Pigafetta we covered. Nard or spikenard is native to the Philippines as well. And the Philippines has a mastic tree, which produces such resin known as Manila copal. One of the more abundant trees in the archipelago, and still a large trade there. Again, also, we could go back and take you to the Spanish, who also got that resin from that tree, and it was abundant in the land even at that time. And let's not forget, Enoch ends with a description of what is definitively lanzones. By the entire description, not just part of it. Don't ignore part of it and try to say that it could be something else. It's not. It's lanzones. Watch forbidden fruit for the full position. We prove that out. The 7 mountains of Eden are firmly the 7 major islands of Visayas, which were mountains before the flood, now islands. When Enoch wrote of this, they were mountains. Such also proves he wrote it before the flood. Wow, this is getting good. 7 mountains of Eden as the 7 major islands of Visayas, fitting the resources and exact orientation Enoch describes both inside and on the surface of the earth. Incredible. Fitting history and geography all along, really just obscured, that's all. I mean, it's never been missing. It's been there. The first book of Enoch and Jubilees have always been in circulation. No, maybe not in the Western world, but they still were, even Bible canon in Ethiopia, and remain so to this very day. I mean, by all means, though, please produce the other islands that are northeast of the eastern exit of the Indian Ocean. I mean, go ahead. Where are they? The ones northeast of the Indies. Yeah, no one can. And it has to have history as the Garden of Eden and the Land of Gold. Philippines, check. Everyone else, And it would have to match all the resources Solomon's Navy brought. Philippines, check, 100%. Everyone else making claims, and many of them, again, we showed you 8 out of 13 missing. Ludicrous propositions, unscholarly and unacademic in any sense. Also, it would have to be on Shem's southeastern border, which means it can't be in mainland Asia, it can't be in Africa, it can't be in Europe, it can't be in the Americas. I mean, this is pretty specific. And Philippines, check. And it would have to be named Ophir and Tarshish, or Christ and Argyre, as a matter of fact in historical writings. Well, in order to compete with the Philippines, it would, because it is recorded as such in writing as fact, not speculation. The Bible would have to lead there. Well, it leads to the Philippines and nowhere else. Yeah, nada. No one else. Nothing else. This is firm, concrete, and set. Nothing to debate or even discuss any further, really. Next, the Archangel Gabriel has a record in heaven found in Qumran as a fragment there, which fully affirms these 7 mountains of Eden as he expands a little, defining the 9 mountains in a larger region of the east. We will identify them and vet the story, and this is monumental because this plugs a big gap in history that's going to blow your mind. Oh, yeah. We have 400 videos on this channel, one for every day of the year now, many just as profound with some 50 or so in Tagalog for Filipinos, and now 6 in Spanish to start. We also have been setting up subtitles for 20-plus languages for most of our videos. Don't forget to like and subscribe and click the bell for notifications of new uploads. Join our email list, though, as YouTube, well, they just fail to notify often, and we will notify you ourselves at thegodculture.com. Just fill in the pop-up. We now have alternative platforms for videos on Rumble, Odyssey, and Utreon, and our new podcast is also available for pretty much all of our videos as well. All links in the description box. Friend us on Facebook at The God Culture, space original. If you prefer an alternative, we now have Parler, link below. We now have 6 books published internationally, being read in over 100 countries, with our new release, the first book of Enoch, the oldest book in history, and you know that it is because we prove it in the introduction and the first couple of videos, even in this series. We also have now launched Ophir Philippines coffee table book in the U.S., Canada, U.K., and many overseas markets on Amazon, and it is available in hardcover or softcover there. Makes a great gift. Also a great coffee table piece, which begins the conversation about the Philippines being Ophir. And there's facts there, many. There's more in Solomon's Treasure, but this makes the case. The information, the data's there. The maps are tremendous because they're beautiful, full color there. And it's available hardcover, softcover, so that's good. Additionally, we launched the Book of Jubilees, the Torah calendar, with color maps and interiors. So, you can find that there, as many have requested. We already have those in color in the Philippines, in all the copies in the Philippines. We don't have any black and white maps for Jubilees here. The Book of Enoch, however, is black and white on both Shopee Philippines and Amazon. And then on Amazon overseas, we do have that available now in color and hardcover or softcover, either way in color, for both Enoch and Jubilees now. All books, including Solomon's Treasure, now are free in eBook. Just go to ophirinstitute.com for all the links for your area for all of our books. More coming soon. Thank you for watching. Now, always remember, prove all things for yourself. Yah bless to everyone.